card for a parking problem.
For in your 23.
Yeah, that's for I'll get a 28 one truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
The line truck, White Lincoln X-ray 985 should come back up 10.
So you had 2000. Patrick's faulting.
10-4. I think it's put a little note in something like that. I'm going to be leaving a note on his vehicle advising him to remove it.
Rockingham 505. 505 intercepting Millicent case for Athens. Explain it. Soon to be X. Slasher tires and has made threatening comments to her. She's concerned he might return.
And forgive this at 32.
10-4. You're assigned to a vandalism case in Athens. Did you copy the 505?
Yeah, 4. No, 3 in Depot Street. Truck boy entry 5.
7435.
10.
10-4.
You go 643 again.
143.
You go with that 43 you had. I didn't hear any, but I had just looks like we do.
10-4. I just wanted to know if you should be put back 76 to Cabana Circle or to the subject's address.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on that town property case, and I'll be 76 to the Williams Road address to see if I can find the owner.
10-4. 449 1120.
449 1121, thank you.
10-4.
Code 4. 4.
Rockingham 535.
Yeah, that was Green College.
535.
Should be. Got no for a woman who fucked into a house. I'll slide up that way.
Caller is now been able to close the front door. He's now pounding on the door, trying to get in now. About 5 foot, long dark hair, got tie-dye shirt on, and number 21 is on.
We have separation. Excuse me. Right. Hey, guys. Good evening. Thank you for being here with me on Saturday night and hopefully keeping me sane, or at least giving me a chance to be sane. We have some dark topics to go over tonight, but, with dark topics, you want to, if possible, look for chances to lighten it up and find some humor. Hopefully, those will emerge along the way. That's a little tougher when you're doing a show by yourself, but I'll do my best. And one of the things that I just got a message. One of the things that I like about the fact that this channel doesn't have oh, that's was message from a source. I'll get back to you, man. Um, one of the reasons I like the fact that this channel doesn't have thousands of viewers. A lot of time, I'm really preparing these shows at the last second, and so it's a little bit less pressure for me to be too polished. It's just kind of putting it out there. So thank you guys. I appreciate for putting up. Man, I'm kind of just here in the background a lot of times while you guys are talking, anyways. So, which is cool. I'm like elevator music. So I was thinking today, what if this is just a hypothetical. What if the feds had grabbed messages from the witnesses? Because we know that the feds they subpoenaed their phone records. And so this would give them call records and maybe location data. And then for some of them, we also know that they went the next step to get warrants. So they had to show some kind of probable cause, or at least pretend to, in order to get content from those messages, right? So they have content from a lot of these witnesses, people that are not suspected of any kind of a crime, but were named by a defense theory. Extraordinary stuff, right? But this is what happened. There's no doubt that this is what happened. But hypothetically, what if among that trove of content that they got from some of these witnesses, what if, let's just hypothetically, they found two things. One, that there was no murder conspiracy, that there just wasn't, right? There'd be a lot of ways for that data and those messages to show that. For instance, you might have the data from Colin's phone that shows that he was gone 5 minutes before John and Karen arrived, right? So that would be completely exculpatory for Colin. And there may be other types of exculpatory evidence in there that showed that there was no, even just the fact that there was no messages where people seem to be communicating anything conspiratorial, that would be exculpatory. However, in addition to those messages showing that, hypothetically, what if it showed that one of the witnesses lied on the stand? And I have no reason to think that that's the case, but this is hypothetical. But what would the feds do in that situation? This is a hypothetical, I think. So depends on what their goal is, right? If the goal is to help Karen, then they would try to leak. Let's just use that word. There's probably a better legal word, but just easier for now, let's say leak. Only the evidence which could be used to impeach the testimony of the witness. I don't think that they would let it out that the evidence was exculpatory, that it disproved the conspiracy theory. But they would want to try to find a way, I think, to get out that evidence that would impeach one or more of the witnesses. Why? I don't think it's because they have some deep connection to Karen or they're trying to save Karen. Oh, that's possible, right? I don't even think it's that they're trying to help David Yannetti, although that's a factor. He does have deep personal connections to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I think that is the root of what happened here. But what they care most about is their own career reputations, their own personal reputations. They care about headlines, all right? And I think we've seen that in action continuously. Now, they could have come forward to clear the witnesses that are being falsely accused and hounded by a mob. Now, this kind of thing is done all the time. For instance, in the Moscow, Idaho situation, where the 4 kids in the house were killed, presumably by Brian Kohlberger, there were a lot of witnesses that looked really, that became the target in international media right away within days, and for seemingly good reason, right? So one of the girls had a boyfriend, right? And she had called him numerous times that night, and he wasn't answering. They had an on and off relationship. There was a DoorDash guy who delivered food at 4 o'clock, minutes before this happened. There was a guy who was seen on video kind of shadowing the girls outside the food truck when they got out of the bar they were drinking at. And so there were several suspects like that. And these poor people were having their names thrown around by the media. And the state police there did the right thing. As soon as they exonerated those people, they came out and said, no, these people are not persons of interest to us. Why? Why would they do that? Because it's the right damn thing to do, right? Because innocent people are being destroyed. So there's no reason that the U.S. Attorney's Office could not do this here. They'll use an excuse, oh, the investigation is still officially open, even though nothing is being investigated. That's very common strategy by the federal government when they don't want things to be made public that are embarrassing to them. Very common, especially with the FBI, but any of these federal agencies. I've followed it for a long time. Trust me, that's how they operate. So they could do the right thing. They choose not to. But could they even take the extra step here of possibly trying to interfere further with this case and make further ruin, further destruction on the lives of these people by leaking something that, for instance, hypothetically would show that somebody lied on the stand? Why would they do something like that? So that's the thing that I want to explore tonight. When you look at how did Karen and her team get to walk into the office of then first U.S. Attorney Josh Levy, no one gets to do that. No one else in the public gets to do that. You have to have deep connections to be able to do that. That doesn't mean that it's wrong automatically, but it's just that's not something that you or I could do or any normal regular defense attorney with their client could do. So there's so many questions here. Why was the office of the U.S. Attorney leaking the days and the times of grand jury appearances for the witnesses to the defendant in a murder case? So they were leaking the times of when these people were scheduled, the witnesses were scheduled, people that were named by the defense theory. They were leaking the days and times of their appearances to the defendant, knowing, and listen, I can't prove that they knew, but these people follow headlines the way a puppy follows bones, right? I mean, this is what they do. The U.S. Attorney's Office lives for headlines. That's what we're seeing Josh Levy doing a headline now, pretty much now that he's going to be leaving office in about a month. He's doing it every other day. I mean, I've never seen a U.S. attorney do this many headlines. This is what they live off. That's their oxygen, headlines. Okay. And so think about this. They're definitely following what's going on. They've taken on this case that not only they took on the case where the Karen Reed case, where Josh Levy promised Karen that he would handle this himself. This is extremely unusual. Now he was then first assistant U.S. attorney at the time, but then he becomes U.S. attorney, acting U.S. attorney, and these witnesses are coming in. Now, normally when a witness comes in, there's one assistant U.S. attorney that questions him. These people were showing up to find that there was a team of two top assistant attorneys plus U.S. attorney himself. This is not this kind of treatment doesn't even happen in the 9/11 investigation, a terrorism investigation, a massive attack, a mafia case. It's unheard of, but it was going on here. So one thing is for sure, they were damn well paying attention to any headlines, anything that was going on in the media or in social media. So they understood that starting at the end of April of 2023, Karen, through her blogger, had turned this case into a circus. I guarantee they were aware of that in every way. And that this circus that was drummed up by Turtle Boy was hounding their witnesses that were scheduled to appear before their federal grand jury. Yet, knowing this was going on, they leaked the days and times when those witnesses were going to appear to the defendant, which by itself, if any time, would be super wrong. But doing it in that environment, knowing what that defendant was doing with it. There needs to be a serious investigation of this. But for now, let's just continue talking about how unusual some of this stuff was and get to the point that hopefully I'll make. The U.S. Attorney's Office ignored the cries for help from these witnesses, too, when they said, hey, you got to help us. There's a mob hounding us. Why were FBI agents that were assigned to this case communicating with Karen's social media minions? That's unbelievable. Why did the U.S. attorney himself, as I said, why was he questioning the witnesses? Why did he use a blow up of TB Daily News to question them? So the witnesses, so he knew that those witnesses were being hounded by Turtle Boy through the defendant, through information that they were leaking, yet he puts up a blow up of TB Daily News so they can see it. That's like sending them a message. Yeah, we're on the same team. Us and Turtle Boy. We're on the same team. We're going to get you. You have no fucking chance. This is what is going on here, right? So we want to get back to this. Let's come back to this. So table that question. What will the feds do if they have information that might impeach the testimony of one of these witnesses, but also have information that exonerates everybody and basically inculpates Karen? But hold the thought. Now, the thumbnail I made for this show was of a monstrous shadow emerging from a pink mob. Now, bear with me. Let's talk about what the shadow is. This is the shadow theorized by Freud and Carl Jung. What is that kind of a shadow? The shadow is a kind of personality that exists in all of us, hidden below the surface, suppressed. The way it develops, my understanding, again, I'm probably the wrong guy to talk about this, but I'll give you my bartender's analysis of it. So when you, in the early years of your life, you're learning what is acceptable forms of behavior within your family, within your social group. So for instance, if you're in preschool and you look over and a kid has a candy bar, and your natural urge as a human being is to want that candy bar. And if you see that kid is smaller than you, you might say, hey, I'm going to go over and just punch that kid in the nose and take the candy bar. But then the teacher says, punishes you. So you're learning these rules for behavior within society. And so as you do this, you start suppressing certain urges, certain thoughts, all things that that we learn are inappropriate. And so as these things get suppressed, they kind of exist below the surface and they form an alternative kind of being called the shadow. And this shadow we're not aware of it. It's not part of our conscious mind. We're only aware of it indirectly by looking at its impacts. Again, I'm only good at making Bloody Mary. So hang with me here. I'm doing the best I can. But so the shadow is not part of our conscious mind, but it's there, and it's trying to kind of be felt out, trying to be felt in other ways because it never makes us to the conscious mind. So it leaks out and it does what we call projection. Now, we don't have to get too deep into this. And like I said, we actually can't because I'm not qualified. But projection is a defense mechanism where we unconsciously project our darkest thoughts onto someone else. So basically, we have these thoughts within us, but we know they're inappropriate. And you kind of want to have to destroy them or get rid of them. And a way for them to escape is to project them onto another person. Projecting means that other person actually doesn't have those characteristics or qualities. We're projecting them onto them. So it's only in our own mind. It's not real. That's what projection is. So we always have these thoughts and feelings bubbling to the surface, and our conscious mind immediately recognizes them as monstrous, so it projects it out onto someone else because the conscious mind recoils in horror. So that's how we get rid of them. Does this explain some of the monstrous behavior displayed in the Free Karen Reed crowd? Now, look, I'm gonna frustrate everybody here at some point tonight, I promise. So I'm not just picking on FKR. I always try to take a both sides approach to pieces of evidence, testimony, legal strategies. We're going to go over Dr. Russell's testimony and the Dauber hearing and all that stuff from the other day. And I will both sides it, which will probably frustrate a lot of people. I'm sorry. That's my shadow, I guess. That's the way I am. But I've always been that way. I don't know. Maybe it can make me annoying, but sometimes it can make me useful, right? So we see a lot of truly abhorrent behavior in the Free Karen Reed crowd. And I'm not just saying that because They're on the other side. All right. I was somewhat on that side early on in this case, right? And I saw it then too. You saw this. So when Turtle Boy would do these on his show, he would do these calls to the witnesses, and they wouldn't answer the phone. But I think Jillian answered the phone once, but for the most part, they didn't. He'd leave these somewhat entertaining but cruel messages to them. And even for a half a second before you catch yourself, I could see a little bit of entertainment value in it myself. But then pretty quickly, I'm the kind of person that's kind of very self-aware, and I'm like, no, this is actually just pure cruelty. What is it about within us that enjoys that kind of cruelty? But then what made me really aware of how wrong it was looking in the chat, in Turtle Chat, because there was a period for a few weeks that I watched the show back. That was the first time I'd ever seen it, back in April and May of 2023, and you saw this real mob thing forming where everybody in that chat was laughing it up, no matter what cruel thing he said to describe one of the witnesses, horse face or this and that. They loved it. And it would continue on, as they posted in social media. And I was like, wow, this truly is a vicious feeding frenzy. What is going on? Are these people all bad people? No, I don't think that's probably the case. But there's something going on that their worst nature is coming out. So this would makes you think of things like shadow and projection and group psychology. So, and what goes on in witch hunts, right? So you have these frustrations within you that are carried through the shadow, and you project that onto someone else. And instead of the monster being inside you, you make someone else the monster. You're inventing what they are, but you're turning them into your own mind. They're subhuman. You're turning them into a monster. And that monster has to be slayed. It has to be crucified, right? You can put it that way too. It has to be sacrificed. So the pandemic, which really ends right as John O'Keefe dies. So there's a really stark transition there. That was one of the first nights out, right? The pandemic was a really anxious time for a lot of people. And I believe historically, you see during these times of mass anxiety, that's when the shadow really strikes out and tries to seek scapegoats. Think of 1933 in Nazi Germany with the rise of Hitler. But it wasn't just there. There was a lot of that even going on in this country too, because this were the years of the Great Depression. So no, I'm not old enough to remember the Great Depression, for those of you who think I am. But I know anybody here probably in their 30s and 40s probably doesn't like history. I'm not going to give you a history lesson. I've already probably given you a failed psychology lesson. So we'll spare you the history lesson, but this was a very dark time, right? When the Depression, really up until 1933, there was no Social Security. So if you were starving, you were starving. At best, you could maybe get to a soup kitchen. But they were anxious times, and in many cities, 25% unemployment and stuff like that. So really, really anxious times. And during times of anxiety, it seems that, or right after a war or something like that, then that's maybe when you get, because of this deep public anxiety, you get a witch hunt. It seems to be there. And I think maybe that is partly represents the shadow, that anxiety. And during times of anxiety, we also have, I want to play a clip here, actually. Let's take a break from my voice so I can play you a pretty cool clip here. Thank you, Claire Murray. I appreciate it. This is a clip from the Batman movie.
Here's my honest review of Mint Mobile's unlimited data plan. The only reason I was skeptical is because I hadn't heard of Mint Mobile.
Unfortunately, commercials are a big thing on YouTube right now.
The only difference is money. For new customers, they're offering 15.
All right.
I'm gonna need a cup of coffee.
So this is from The Dark Knight.
The good cop, bad cop routine.
Not exactly.
Never start with the head. The victim gets all fuzzy. You can't feel the neck. See?
You wanted me. Here I am.
I wanted to see what you'd do. And you didn't disappoint. You let 5 people die. Then you let Dent take your place. Even to a guy like me, that's cold.
Where's Dent?
Those mob fools want you gone so they can get back to the way things were. But I know the truth. There's no going back. You've changed things. Forever.
And why do you want to kill me?
I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? Go back to ripping off mob dealers? No. You complete me.
You're garbage. You kills for money.
Don't talk like one of them. You're not. Even if you'd like to be. To them, you're just a freak. Like me. They need you right now. When they don't, they'll cast you out. Like a leper. See, their morals, their code. It's a bad joke. Dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be. I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve.
Okay, let's stop it there. This is what he's saying, is that these people, I can't help but thinking in Gotham and comparing this to the U.S. Attorney's Office. So these are people that have always, people like Josh Levy, people of extreme privilege, people always had everything go their way, everything. They get to tell themselves, I'm on the side of good. They assume that they were born as the good person because they always had the good grades and they've always had good contacts, and they hang around with the good people who say all the right things, who have all the right ideologies, who are politically correct. And they just assume that they're the good guys and they have integrity. But in reality, their integrity has never been tested. And this is what the Joker does in that Dark Knight trilogy. That's the middle episode of the first trilogy, The Dark Knight. He's bringing chaos to Gotham in order to show people what they really are, that they're not really good. Because when faced with a crisis, they eat their own, as the Joker says. Now, it's just a movie, but I do think there's a lot to it. I think when you look at somebody like Josh Levy, he's never had to make a real decision about doing the right thing that might involve paying a price for him. And he just is another character that reminds me of is Chuck on Better Call Saul. That's the brother who is he has a mental illness where he thinks he thinks electricity will harm him, like the surrounding him, the vibes from electricity or whatever. So, but he has this really kind of rigid idea that he's always been on the side of the law. And so automatically everything he does is on the side of goodness. Everything he does is above, is ethical, just without even really thinking about it. It's just, it's a right. It belongs to him, And so these guys in the U.S. Attorney's Office are kind of like that. They have all the right connections. So Josh Levy was from a partner in Ropes and Gray. I'm told that 30% of the U.S. attorneys at the Boston U.S. Attorney's Office formerly worked for Ropes and Gray. So it's very much an old buddy thing, right? And they're all in touch with each other. They go to the same cookouts. They all believe that they're the good people, right? Their goodness, their morals are never tested. They never have to face hardship. And if there's a certain amount of arrogance that leads them to make mistakes that they wouldn't have otherwise made. They can't even see that in their own minds because they're so sure that they're automatically on the side of good. They pay their taxes on time. They didn't get detentions in high school. They never got in trouble, right? They'd never been arrested. They're the good guys. Maybe at most they drank it when they were underage. Even so, that's about it, right? So these guys just can't even envision a world where maybe they did something wrong and have to apologize for it, or they have to make amends to it. It's just not their way. It's their minds won't process it that way. It's just they're not capable of it, So this is what I believe is going on. Now, I don't think that the Fed. Well, we'll come back to the Feds in a second because there's a couple of things that I want to explore before I get to that. But back on the shadow, the real monster is inside us, but it really is more in people that are, the more insecure you are about whatever's going on in your life, the more likely you are to join up in a mob, the less likely you are to maybe be self-reflective too, And so the mob is looking for victims to sacrifice, and they're projecting imaginary characteristics onto those people they want to sacrifice. Now, let's keep this. I'm going to come back to this. I know it seems like long-winded, but I want to get to the Higgins part first. So I see that Brian Higgins allegedly called in this thug show, JFK or something like that. I don't know if it was him, and I don't know why he would pick that show. I mean, it seems like he should be way above that show. But I think we have to look, too, at what these guys are all doing. Now, especially if you're in law enforcement, you're taught to trust the system and let the system work. And you're advised, presumably by your lawyers, lay low and don't communicate with the witnesses, But these guys are human beings, so they see what's being said about them. They see it on the news. I can't say for sure what Brian Higgins does, but it wouldn't shock me that if a lot of these guys are paying attention to social media, they're watching some of this YouTube stuff that we put out. And if you're watching this for a year, 2 years, and you're seeing things said about you, much of it that's false or much of it that unfairly characterizes you and how you've lived your life, it's got to be maddening, right? I've seen it myself here. So I'll just go into that briefly, but before I come back to Higgins. So a few days ago, was it maybe 4 days ago, I had seen a clip from the fundraiser, the Karen Reed fundraiser, where this guy, and I guess his name is Jimmy from Worcester, 20-year-old guy from Worcester, 28-year-old guy. I think he's the one that's always dressed as Judge Cannoni, wearing in judge's robes and a blonde wig outside the courthouse. Now, I've always seen that, and I've always thought it was absurd and disrespectful to the court process. And other people, I've actually talked to people from other countries that can't even believe it's allowed to go on. Now, I disagree with them on that. I actually think I'm proud that this country is respectful enough of free speech that we allow people to be nuts. But it is still, why would somebody want something like that as part of their group? This is a woman on trial for murder. It's not a circus. But anyways, whatever, to each his own, right? It really doesn't offend me that he's out there. But then I see this clip where I'm not going to show it, I'm not going to mention, but he's referring to a witness who has an innocent young woman who just happened to be in the house for a birthday party that John never went into, that GPS shows that he never went into, that every witness agrees he didn't go into, that logic insists he never went into that house. For the crime of not lying and saying he did, they project onto her. And there must be some level of projection here, because the jokes that he did was to call her a pig, to say she had 5 stomachs, that she ate Chloe. I was horrified watching. I wasn't horrified. I was angry. And so I said on the show, I think several days ago, that if I was there, even if I was free Karen Reed, I would have yanked the mic out of his hand and walked him to the door. And I would have. People that know me know I would have. All right. But what bothers me is not just that this guy would do this, but then looking at everybody laughing there. Dean Bill Reed laughing. Nobody's surprised that Turtle Boy's laughing, but everybody's laughing at this cruelty. What is going on that people could laugh at that? And, how, as far as I can tell, Bill Reed has lived a good life. He's one of those people like Josh Levy. Everything has been, or like Chuck on Better Call Saul. Everything seems to have been by the book, never in trouble, went from right to college, graduated on time, right to grad school, graduated on time, becomes a professor and accountant, spends all his time with his nose studying tables and books and accounting. Not the life that I would want to leave, but it's a good life. It's a clean life, right? Has a family. I don't know of anything at all negative in his background, anything controversial. There probably isn't anything, right? But yet here he is laughing at these cruel jokes, paying for that guy to go up there and do that. It's stunning. It's stunning. Not one person thought to put a stop to that. Are they all bad people? They're all doing bad. They're all participating in something cruel and evil in the way that only a mob could do. So what's going on here? Why does this mob, make sure my mic's still good, why does this mob do this kind of stuff? We have to look at this not in a way so we ourselves begin looking for scapegoats in order to project our own anger onto. No, we want to dissect this carefully. Now, there's a time to stand up to these people. So anyways, when I reached out, when I made those comments on that show, this pissed this guy off. So what did he do? He does what they all do in that mob. He starts putting out stories about me that are completely false. Now, I knew that this would happen a year and a half ago. It's happened several times on this, from them trying to say that I faked cancer, for them trying to say that I was involved with roofing girls and bringing them upstairs and doing this and that. I mean, none of it has anything to do with me. And even people from that era of that didn't like me would admit this guy is a straight shooter. In fact, the ones that didn't like me, usually that's why, because I wasn't the kind of guy that allowed certain things to go on in my bars. And one of the things that I never allowed to go on was cocaine. Now, I can talk about that a little bit. It was 1987. And my first day, so 1987, there was a bar in Worcester called the Blarney Stone. And it was a few blocks from where I went to school, Clark University. And this bar was a neighborhood bar that back then, I think it was Tuesday and Thursdays, they had a college night. Dollar drafts. Shit, it was a long time ago. It might have even been 50-cent drafts. I don't know. But they had dollar drafts and free hot dogs. That was it. But that was enough to get people in there, right? And I started going in there when I was like 19. And so right after I turned 21, I was in there one night, not on a college night. I went in there on like a Friday night. The place was pretty busy, but all locals. And this was a neighborhood bar. It was actually had a nickname in the newspaper. The newspaper called it the Worcester Telegram and Gazette called it the Bucket of Blood. So I mean, it really wasn't that bad, but it had a little bit of a reputation. So I go in there on a Friday night, and I had a few beers, and then somebody pointed out to me that this guy sitting on the corner of the bar drinking was the owner. And I did something a little bit out of character, and I walked, probably because I had a little bit of beer coverage, right? And I walked over and I said, and I knew they had an opening, or were soon to have an opening there. So I walked over and I said, because they had some college kids that worked on those college nights, Tuesday and Thursday. So I walked over and I said, hey, Tom, what's his name? I said, hey, Tommy. I said, my name's Kevin, and I'm going to be your next bartender, or something like that. It was just really cocky and really out of character for me to do something like that. And he just kind of looked up like, oh, yeah? And I guess he liked the cockiness or whatever. So he actually said, all right, well, you start right now then. I'm like, what? he says, I got to go. He goes, but he calls over the bartender, who is a local guy. And he says, veteran guy. And he says, he goes, all right, let Kevin work the rest of the night. The tips go to I think the guy's name was Brad. Tips go to Brad, and you train him a little bit, and let him get his feet wet and learn how to do it. And so, and then the owner gets up and leaves. Oh, but before he did, he told me, he said, "Listen, one thing I want to tell you. The one rule is this: no matter what, don't leave the bar." And that wasn't a rule just for me as the new guy or as a college kid. The bartenders, what he meant was don't leave from behind the bar. Basically, the rule was if there's a fight, the regulars will take care of it themselves. And on Tuesday and Thursdays, they had a doorman there to card kids coming in. But on the other nights, there was no doorman. So now I go behind the bar, and the bartender, Brad, spends about 2 minutes giving me instructions on prices and stuff like that. There wasn't even a good price system. They even kind of all had their own prices. But he said, make sure you make any of the regulars a good drink, and everybody here tonight's a regular. And he says, I'm going to be over there playing cards. So he went over into the back corner and sat down at a card game, a poker game, instead of playing cards. And I remember all the guys looked at me. All the regulars like, fresh meat. I'm like, oh God, this is going to be bad. And it was rough. They rode me hard, Oh, but the owner had told me before he left, he said, all right, this is your training shift. And that was a Friday. He said, your first shift is Sunday at 11 a.m. Be here Sunday at 11 in the morning. I'm like, okay. So I got through that night. There were a couple of fights. The regulars did take care of it. I have no real training, trying to understand what's going on. And 11 o'clock, so get through the night. So Sunday, I pull up and I park across the street. And as I'm walking over, I see a crowd of about 15 people hanging around outside the bar. And, I recognized some of the regulars that I had seen Friday night. And I could tell, as I got there, I could tell these guys were already wasted. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, and I kind of got the sense they probably had been up all night, which turned out to be true. And when they saw me coming, they had seen me Friday, so they recognized me. They all just kind of get out of the way and kind of snickered a little bit. There was an old guy standing at the door, and he had kind of his hand on the handle. And when he sees me coming, he goes, "Not open yet." I said, "I'm the bartender." And he laughs. He goes, "Oh, yeah?" And this guy was an old Korean War vet. He goes, "All right, have fun." He opens the door, lets me in, and leaves. So I've got to walk in and get this place going on my own. I know nothing, So I get the place. I go in within minutes. The place is packed. They're all doing shots. Not packed, but there's like good 15, 20 people in there. They're all doing shots, and the jukebox is cranking. It's like 11:10 in the morning. And I look over, and one of the regulars, I don't want to say he was a biker, but kind of dressed like that, pretty tough family. I got to know him, very tough family. And I looked over, and he's got a bunch of little bags, and he's got a huge bag of weed, and he's got it on the bar, and he's he's filling these little bags of weed. And he's got papers out to roll joints too. I mean, enough for a lot, It was clear even to a naive idiot like me that he was a dealer. And I've given no instructions on this. I don't know what to do, right? So I go over to him and I said, "Hey man," I said, "Are you a regular in here?" And he nodded. Actually, he nodded without looking up. He just kept doing what he was doing. And I'm sitting there, I'm probably sweating. I'm like 167 pounds. I had just come off of mono. And so I'm the same height as I am now, 6'2", 167 pounds. I said, "If you want me to treat you like a regular, I don't want to see anything like that. You got to be discreet." I didn't say he couldn't have drugs. I was just like, nothing should be out in the open, however I said it. And for the first time, he looked up at me. He was kind of surprised, looked very slight smile, but with respect. And he was like, "No problem." And he put all the drugs underneath into his pocket or whatever. I'm sitting there like, oh man, now I need a shot. I think my hands were probably shaking. I'm gonna guess. Literally less than a minute after that, the first fight breaks out, and it's like something you see in a stupid TV show where they bang into the jukebox and it scratches because it was back in the days. Jukeboxes had records in them. I guess probably nobody watching this show remembers that unless they're younger than me. I mean, unless they're older than me. So I'm looking at these two guys fighting. I can still remember their names too. I'm obviously not going to say it. One of the guys is this pretty big guy with missing most of his front teeth missing. And I'm like, what do I do here? I'm told not to ever leave the bar, but it wasn't me. So I left the bar and I walked over. Now, fortunately for me, by the time I got there to break it up, the way fights usually work in the real world, if people are grappling for more than a minute, they run out of energy. And so that's the way it was. They were still kind of locked up on each other, but they really didn't have enough energy left to kind of try to throw punches or anything. And so I just basically told them to knock it off. And I ended up helping them up to their feet. And then I said, you guys are regulars, right? And they're like, yeah. And I said, well, then you must know where the dust brand is. Now, the reason I was asking was because I didn't know. I didn't know anything. They thought what I was saying was, now you got to clean up your mess. And to my amazement, they cleaned up the mess together, the two guys that had just been fighting. So you learn it on the spot. Now, maybe a week later, I'm working a night and a pretty good crowd in there, maybe say 75 people. And the bartender, I'm with another bartender. The bartender says, hey, Kev, so-and-so, again, I'm not going to say names. Actually, I don't even remember at this point. Left a couple of tips for us in the kitchen. I said, what do you mean? He goes, some blow. So this drug dealer went into, there's a little kitchen near the edge of the bar. It's a small little room that was closed. He went in there and put down a couple of lines for us, which the bartender I was with appreciated and thought I would appreciate it too. And I was just like, no, man, I don't do that. Now, this was the start of me starting to learn that half the guys in that bar, at least half the regulars, were actually drug dealers. And that was the environment that I worked in. I never once accepted that or did coke. I never had any interest in it. I've never handled it in my life. I've never handled it, except that when you have eventually, I don't know if that point, but if soon they would, the way they would do it is people would buy these in little, they'd wrap them up in little pieces of plastic. And so you'd find these little pieces of plastic in the bathrooms. So the closest I've ever come to touching coke is to handling those little things, throwing them out. And they would have some residue on them. That's my only contact with cocaine in my life. Now, from watching these guys over a period of a couple of years, I learned who was coming off the street looking to buy drugs. I learned to watch their behavior. I could tell when someone was going into the bathroom to do cocaine. You just pick these things up if you're observant. And every good bartender is observant. So when the owner, I left there and I went to work in Boston, and then I came back. And then at some point the owner said, I'd like to make you the manager. And the owner had a family, he didn't want to be there at night, and he generally wasn't. So he really, and that's when most of the activity is, right? So I said, I'll do it, but only on one condition. The drug dealer's got to go. And he said, yeah, I'll back you up, whatever. Now, that was a moment of courage for him, not because he's afraid of these guys. He was a tough guy himself, but because a lot of these guys were from the neighborhood that he grew up in. He grew up in that neighborhood. They were friends of his. And that was the hardest part about it for me too, is a lot of these guys I actually liked, but I was like, that's it. There's no more dealing going on in the bar. So basically I made it be known, if it goes on, anything goes on in the bar like that, you're gone. And so I threw a lot of guys out. And over the next 6 months, I had my windows smashed on my vehicle probably about 5 or 6 times. And fortunately, it wasn't like in Roadhouse where they cut the tires, but it slashed the tires. No, it was, but my windows were getting smashed all the time. And the first time it happened, my insurance didn't cover glass, or it didn't cover the deductible. And I eventually had to upgrade my insurance. But I also learned with this guy, Dave Kenny, who was one of the regulars there. He was a good guy. Dave used to help me out. We'd go to the dump yard. They had a couple of salvage yards out there, and he would find the glass windows that would fit my car, which I'm not good with tools, and he'd help me put it in. And so you learn to get by, and eventually it would kind of settle down. But I spent my entire career in the bar industry. So later I went on to buy my own place, throwing drug dealers or throwing anybody that would do drugs out of my bar. So you can imagine my shock when now this little fucking creep, Haley Walbrecht, Jason the Catfisher is his real name, and this guy Jimmy trying to say that I was giving cocaine over the bar to 17-year-old girls. We were also extremely strict on IDs. We were known as the strictest bar around. It's all utter nonsense. But this crowd is sucking it up because they are a mob and they're doing mob-like things. They're projecting. They're trying to find scapegoats. They don't operate with any kind of rules. They don't have any kind of ethics. They don't care who they destroy. They're a mob that is in a feeding frenzy. Now, this stuff doesn't destroy me. I can take it. And I'm going to stand. And I've made that decision a long time ago. No matter what they make up, I will stand. But it's a difficult thing for everybody. And so this has been, even what I've had to go through is hard, but it's much harder on the witnesses in this case who are having their careers, their life's work in some cases, utterly destroyed. Excuse me. Let me take a sip. So obviously you have young people like Julie Nagel, Sarah Levinson, Allie McCabe, young witnesses like that, having it should be at the best part of their lives, getting destroyed by this vicious mob. But then you have, on the other end, you have guys that have dedicated their lives to trying to do useful work, and in some cases, heroic work. And to have that destroyed by a mob that just needs scapegoats because of other anxieties in their life, because of the pandemic, because of personal flaws, whatever. But they're looking for scapegoats. Now let's pull up what we were able to find online about Brian Higgins. Now, you might, if you're a turtle person, not be interested in this. Let me see if I can find this. Hold on a second. One of a kind. All right. So this was an article. Looks like, so this is Mario Oliveira. Let me actually, there's also another article here. Let me see if I can find this one. All right, let's pull this one up first. Special Agent Brian Patrick Higgins, Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms and Explosives. He won all kinds of awards for his actions on this night, November 2nd, 2010. This is from, what is this website? It looks like it's an official government website. That logo on the top is too small for me to read. So what he won, though, all right, so he won the Law Enforcement Congressional Badge of Bravery. I mean, I don't know how many of these things they give out. Can't be more than one a year, right? And it's a rare privilege to win something like this, a rare honor to win something like this. So it says on November 2nd, 2010, in connection with an ongoing ATF investigation, an arrest warrant was obtained on a suspect for firearms violations. While on surveillance, a vehicle known to be driven by the suspect was observed to be parked on the street in front of his mother's residence. As the suspect departed the residence, Special Agent Brian Higgins and Task Force Officer Oliveira began their approach, while Somerville Sergeant Detective McCain and Patrol Sergeant Reardon maintained cover. Task Force Officer Oliveira approached the suspect while he was seated in his car and informed him of his arrest warrant, at which point the suspect opened fire, striking Officer Oliveira 5 times and disabling him. Agent Higgins Sergeant Detective McCain and Sergeant Reardon left their positions of cover and without regard for their respective safety, immediately returned fire, eventually fatally wounding the suspect. So Oliveira has been shot 5 times, and he's still the suspect is in a car still firing out. And so these guys, it's not just a matter of taking cover, but their partner, their fellow law enforcement officer, is badly hurt and is on the ground in the sights of the guy with the gun who's shooting. So Higgins left his position of cover to pull Officer Oliveira to the rear of the target's vehicle. And then once removed from the threat of crossfire, Agent Higgins retrieved a field medical kit and began applying pressure to the wounds. Eventually, Oliveira was rushed to the hospital where he received life-saving trauma care. Now let's go to this other article here, which actually gives a little better version of it, or a little longer version of it. Let's see, the night. All right, got it. I don't know what this is. This is just what turned up online, but Police One. I don't know what this is, this magazine. Police Heroes. The night I was killed in the line of duty, but survived. How Detective Mario Oliveira survived near fatal injuries, aided by the reassuring words of a kind nurse. On November 2nd, as we already said, so he was actually a veteran of the Somerville Police Department, Oliveira, and he was assigned to a plainclothes task force working with ATF Brian Higgins. The two decided to start the shift by attempting to locate a gun runner who was wanted on felony weapons violations and was on the run. As dusk was lowering its dark curtain over the city, Brian and Mario spotted the target's red Honda Accord parked on the street near his residence. They requested the assistance of Somerville Police Department Lieutenant Joe McCain and Sergeant Jimmy Reardon. Now, before I come back to this, so what we found on Agent Higgins is that he comes from a family of firefighters, going back generations, at least his dad and his grandfather, maybe more, in the city of Cambridge. So what he always wanted to be was a firefighter. And he eventually became that, rose to the rank of lieutenant. And I believe he had EMT training and stuff like that. So he had plenty of medical knowledge on that. So he was having a very good career. But then along came the Iraq War. And so in the 90s, he had been on the National Guard, but no longer was during the Iraq War. But then somehow he signed back up and he went and fought in Iraq. So I'm not sure how long he was there. So he was probably there a year or two, right? Then he comes back, and again he's on the fire department. And we can't know why, right? Was it the need for more action? Was it a sense of obligation? Whatever the case was, he left the fire department, which is, like I said, generations of Higginses were there, and joined the ATF. And so that was probably not very long before this particular story here. So that leads to this night in 2010. So when the gun runner exited the residence, he walked nonchalantly down a driveway with a backpack hanging lazily over one shoulder and slid into the Honda's driver's seat. Mario, with his badge displayed around his neck, approached on foot as Agent Higgins drove up and bumper locked the Honda. That must be where you just put your bumper right on it so the guy can't pull out, preventing his escape. Mario informed the gun runner he was under arrest, but as he took hold of him, a struggle ensued, and the felon shouted, "Shoot me, shoot me!" But the guy's in the car, so I'm imagining that while the guy's struggling and yelling, "Shoot me, shoot me, shoot me," he's reaching for a gun, but Mario can't see that because he's outside the car. So it says Mario could not see a gun, so he physically tried to pull the arrestee from the vehicle with one hand while covering him with his 6-hour 40 caliber with the other. Higgins ran up to the passenger side of the Accord, and Mario glanced up at him momentarily over the roof of the vehicle, and as he looked back down, a series of flashes coupled with explosions came in quick succession. So in the congressional award one that said 5 shots, this one here says 6 shots hit Mario, who was not wearing his bulletproof vest. Mario fell backward onto the pavement and tried to get back up, but said, "It felt like an elephant was on my chest." In an instant, Special Agent Higgins grabbed the back of Mario's collar and dragged him to relative safety behind a car, after which Higgins joined Reardon and McCain, who were returning fire. So he had to, in the middle of a gunfight, he had to run over, and I don't know if he was wearing a bulletproof vest, but we know that Mario wasn't, so probably neither one was, and pull this guy to safety and then join the gunfight. And as a result of the gunfight, the bad guy got killed. Now, I don't know if it'll say in this article who fired that bullet or if they even know. From his vantage point, Mario could see the suspect peeking out from the Honda, firing at the other officers who were returning his fire. Mario urgently wanted to get into the fight and raised his firearm up, but nothing happened except his arm made a strange bumping sound. Although the pain had not yet hit him, he knew one of the gun runner's rounds had clearly disabled his arm. So he took a shot to the arm, and that arm had become the gun arm had become useless. As suddenly as the gunfight started, quiet returned to the residential street. The gun runner would run guns no more. And this is a picture here of the car. And so obviously by the time they took this picture, they had pulled away the ATF car, I assume. And that's probably the officer, Mario Oliveira's sneaker on the ground. No, I'm not sure. It could also belong to the suspect. So even though the gunfight was over, the battle for Mario's life had just begun. Mario started to have thoughts of his little boy at home and fishing with his dad, and realized that these were end-of-life thoughts. He noticed he was bleeding badly and hyperventilating, so he consciously decided to live. As he deliberately slowed his breathing and put pressure on his wounds, Lieutenant McCain knelt next to Mario, and the wounded Detective Oliveira pleaded, "Don't let me die. I need to get home to my son." McCain told him, "You're not going to die. You're going to be okay." But at the same time, seeing the serious nature of Mario's wounds, McCain thought he was telling Mario a lie. The gun runner had done his worst, firing his 9mm semi-automatic handgun rounds at point-blank range. 1 round into Mario's arm, 2 into his chest, and 3 into his stomach. So you can imagine, you just, 9mm is a solid-sized bullet, close range. You're taking 5 or 6 of those into your body, 3 in your stomach, 2 in your chest. It's a miracle that this guy lived. The fight to save his life in the emergency room was frenzied and at times panicked. So he's talking about this from his experience, from his memory, right? So he's dying. So he seems to have been unaware of being dragged to safety. And apparently he's working as a book on this. But so listen, it doesn't mean, this alone doesn't mean that Brian Higgins didn't beat up John O'Keefe with a baseball bat, right? Sometimes someone that's a hero is also the villain, right? That's the way it is in real life. But there is no evidence for that. But there is evidence for the heroic activity. That's real. The other stuff is the imaginary things that these people project onto him as they try to turn him into the monster that they need to slay. But in reality, here's a guy who has spent his life in service, as far as we can tell, right? There's no other articles or accusations of wrongdoing. There's no serious accusation of wrongdoing here in the case of the Karen Reed case. Here's a guy who, on the day before and the day of, attended a wake and a funeral for a fallen officer in New York City, and then came back. He drove back, drove Eddie Hernandez was the other guy's name, one of their partners, Brian Albert, and I think maybe Kevin Albert. And after a long day of that, they decided to get together, according to their testimony, for drinks at the Hillside Pub. And then it's maybe after an hour or two of that, a couple hours, say, Brian probably got a text to say that his friends and family are meeting at the waterfall. And so they go to the waterfall. And after having a few more drinks there, Brian goes briefly to the after hours party. And then, according to his testimony, goes back to the police station to move the vehicles and I had a situation like this too in the bar that I owned. So I had a vehicle in a parking lot that we rented there, but it had to be moved during a storm. I had to make sure I moved it around to the right spots to accommodate the plowing. So, and if I didn't, best case scenario, I got plowed in. Worst case scenario, you got a dick that had me towed. But I think I only got towed once. Usually, but plowed in is not fun either. So, and a lot of times if someone's plowing and they're not happy with you, they really plow you in, So, so that's the situation. Brian had to get back to the police parking lot to move his vehicles to the part of the lot where they needed to be for the plowing. Then he goes home, according to his testimony, falls asleep on the couch, gets up and goes to bed. There's no evidence that anything different happened, right? But people want to project something on Tim. At the very least, they should be saying we're not sure. And who among us has something in our lives? Like, I don't want to be falsely defined. Like, I spent 20 years in my life throwing out drug dealers. Well, I remember even before that, when I was in college and in high school, friends that would try to get me to do coke, I wouldn't do it. I didn't lecture them. I was just like, it's not for me. I was a beer guy. I was a beer and shot guy. And that's all I ever was. I smoked marijuana here and there, but I never really that never was my thing either. That was just to be social. But coke, no. Fuck no. And then these people are going to try to sit there and say shit like that. It's just crazy. So I'm going to finish my presentation but just address thoughts on JFK Live when he goes over the waterfall video. Brian is very agitated. Yeah, I'll take that one on, Eric, and save your questions, and I will come back and take them, guys. I appreciate it. I just happened to see that one here, so I'm going to take it on, and then I'll get back to my presentation. So, because this is probably not much I can speak on authoritatively or with any kind of authority. If there's one thing I can, it's watching bar surveillance video, because I spent 20 years in the bar industry and have watched these tapes many times, and have watched through all those years watching that stuff live and knowing when somebody is agitated, where someone is wound up, especially late at night. So to this day, if I'm still up at 11:30, I will wake up and get a second wind. And unfortunately, so it usually is the case, but my body is still known to wake up for all those years in the industry around that busy time, because that's not only a busy time for a lot of places, but it's the time when people have been drinking a while. And so tempers can flare, people can get a little agitated. And so you got to be on your toes. And especially when you have guys like a big guy like Brian Higgins or Brian Albert around, you really got to be on your toes, because I'm a tall guy, but I've always been a pretty skinny guy, and I don't want to get into fights that I don't have to get into, especially with guys like that. And the key is, once it gets to a fight, it's really too late, especially if you're a skinny dude like me. Damn, now it's like you're struggling with some guy that's pretty badass, So no, what I do is you're always watching, and therefore you anticipate it. Now, when I look at that tape, now it's only like a 3-second clip, right? So I don't really know what I'm watching because it's only a 3-second clip. But in that 3 seconds, yes, he does look agitated. Absolutely. What is he agitated over? Who knows? You know, and he may not even be agitated. That's the problem with taking something that's a 3-second clip. And also, Brian Albert does the very kind of thing that I would do with people too. You reach over with a firm face and you grab somebody's arm and you say, "All right, enough, buddy." I did that all the time. I did it a million times in my life. But one thing we know, just logically, is that if Brian Higgins was agitated, it was not at John. It was not at Karen. All right? This because you can tell. Because Karen has never claimed that that was the case. So if Brian Higgins was agitated at something and he was staring at or shouting at, or staring daggers, or saying aggressive words to John, who was sitting, across the table on the other side, or Karen, they absolutely would. Karen would be telling that story. Karen has never said that. Karen has never told that story. They would have been. So let's say he was, as these people imagine it, angry at John for some reason. Now, there's no indication that he's ever been angry at John. All right. But let's just say for some reason he's angry at John. What do you think Karen and John are going to be talking about when they drive to 34 Fairview? They're now going, if that was the case, they'd be going to a party where this big guy who is mad at you is going to be. Don't you think they'd be talking about that? Yes, they would. Now, Karen has never once said that that in the car they talked about that. She has never once said that in the bar she saw Higgins get mad. So whatever was going on with Brian Higgins in that moment, it had nothing to do with being angry at John or Karen, or even angry in a way that they ever noticed. Or Karen would have exploited that if she knew about it. All right, so let's get back to my fascinating presentation. I got to go back to my notes. I whipped together these notes beforehand. All right. So would the feds in that hypothetical situation, what would they do? Are they going to use this information? They've got the information. I guarantee the feds right now have the information that would put the conspiracy theory to bed. They choose not to. But the question is, if they had information that could show that that could impeach the testimony of one of the witnesses, would they do it? Well, they'd want to find a way to do it. Look, the government during the pandemic, this was not a time of anxiety for government types. People like, especially Biden administration officials. Look, this is what that party stands for. All right, that party is the party of big government. They loved the pandemic. They loved the opportunity to tell people how to behave, how far to stand apart from each other, when to mask up, when to take a vaccine. Now, I'm both sides in this here. Look, I took the vaccines, so I'm not. I'm just saying this is what they like. So this was an opportunity for them to expand government power. So what is going on in the office there? These guys, a good percentage of them worked at Ropes and Gray. Other ones would have worked at similar places. They're elite. There are people that have access. If one of them needs access to something else in the government, they always have access. They have access to the people in power. They're filled with ambition. People that take those positions, now there's some that might take, there's a lot that will take those assistant prosecutor positions right out of college. Now, to get into the U.S. Attorney's Office right out of college, you got to come from an elite college. So again, you're already in elite circles. You're expecting to have an elite career. You're expecting to rub elbows with all the powerful people, and you consider that your birthright. You're ambitious, and for the ones that are older that have come back to the job, like Josh Levy, you're ambitious. You're looking for something else, and the thing that you guys feed on are headlines. Like I said, these are people that assume that they're the good guys. Think back to the Dark Knight video. These are the people that never get that opportunity to find out what they're really made of, because they never have anything that discomforts them. They never have a crisis, really. Society works for them. They're at the top of society. They're people of privilege. And so, but what are they doing here? Well, one thing that they fear is a bad headline, something that embarrasses them, because these are people that live on headlines. These are people that's what's most important to them. That's the main reason someone like Josh Levy would have gone back to work for the U.S. Attorney's Office, that and other political ambition to go up to move ahead, right? So people in those positions, they see what's going on with the mob. And what do? Well, they're used to looking down at the hoi polloi, the unwashed. And those are people that for them, that's something that they're there for these elites to exploit. That's what us unwashed people, that's what we exist for them to exploit us. Now, in their minds, they're exploiting us for our own good, right? Because we're too stupid to run our own lives. We need them. We need Lizzie Warren. We need these types of people, right? That's how they've always thought, so they have a little bit of an ends justify the means thing too. But right now they have egg on their face. Josh Levy does anyways, and the people that worked with him on this. That's going to come out someday. They may be convincing themselves that it's not going to come out. No, it's going to come out. But it might be 4 years down the road, and it might be on page 19 of the Boston Globe, and nobody sees it. I won't be around to see it. But it's going to come out. So at this point, they're trying to take advantage of the chaos that's been created by this mob to hide. And the more Molotov cocktails they can throw into that to stir them up, like stir up the hornet's nest, the easier it is for them to hide what they're doing. So if they suddenly are able to leak out or manage to find a way to get this to the defense, some evidence that shows that one of the witnesses wasn't completely forthcoming on something that has nothing to do with whether or not there was a conspiracy, they're going to do it. I have no idea what if Colin Albert actually did leave there, as he said, at, whatever it was, 12:15 or something like that, 12:12, but he didn't go right home, and he never testified to that. It won't show that evidence would show that Colin didn't kill and had nothing to do with John's death because he wasn't there. But they'd still want it out because they wanted that crowd will season that. See, he lied on the stand. And if he did something like that, it would have been something, I'm sure it would have been something that any teenager would do, nothing, not part of some big conspiracy. So I would watch out for it, be on alert for it. This is what they're going to do. And we in the public have to stay strong, stay steady. There's a time to get angry sometimes. Like, I believe when watching that clown, Jimmy, what he did and that fundraiser, the right thing to do is to show a little anger at what this guy does. All right. When I look at Turtle Boy threatening to bring a mob to the kids of the Attorney General's soccer game, the right thing to do is to show a little bit of anger. So there are situations where it is right to show a little bit of anger. Call, the ways that he talks to, talks about John's mother and stuff like that. No, it's appropriate to show some anger, but we have to control our anger, and our default should try to be calm, rational, but steady at the wheel. They're going to throw stuff at us, but we want to stick up for people that are being bullied too. And these witnesses are being bullied. And we want to stand up against wrongdoing. Listen, part of the forces that are bullying these witnesses are without a doubt the U.S. Attorney, Josh Levy. Yes, there's no reason not to say it. This guy lives on headlines. He certainly understands what that mob that was created with his help, what they're doing. He's the only one that could save them. He chooses not to. He'll in his own mind, he'll give some kind of excuse. Oh, we don't comment on things that are under investigation. There's no investigation going on, but they'll keep that investigation officially open. But what they're really doing is that way they don't have to talk about it. But it's all just an excuse. The real reason is just they want to hide what embarrasses them. They were caught with their pants down on this. We don't know how bad it is. Did Yannetti have some improper access there? Was there improper communications between him and his office and the FBI agents and Karen's team? Seems like a good chance of that. But at the very least, he's embarrassed that he was duped into believing that a conspiracy was possible, and he abused the power of his office to improperly get communications, including content, of people who are not suspected of any crime, of people there's no evidence of wrongdoing. That's a violation of all of our civil rights. That's a threat. That's a danger to all of our civil rights. Now, a couple other things to get into. First, Phelps. I listened to episode 10, which is, I guess he holds out that he may add future episodes, but for now, that'll be the end. And it was very good. I don't listen to all the episodes, but I generally only interested in things that have new information. So just listening, no matter how good the work is, he's talking about things that I'm already familiar with. But I listened to this one because I knew that he interviewed the juror, which I found to be really interesting and really helpful and useful. Now, so I believe that there were 2 jurors that Turtle Boy interviewed, and one, I think a woman, had voted acquittal on all 3. And then the second one was an EMT, a male, who voted, who started out not supposed, well, again, this is according to Turtle Boy, which we really can't be trusted, voted not guilty at first, but then switched over to guilty. But I'm not sure, because when you look at this interview that he did with Phelps, he sounded pretty clear on guilt. He didn't express any doubt, at least nothing that was in the parts that Phelps played. And he was very rational and intelligent and reasonable and did his job as a juror, which is what 90% of jurors will do. And so what did he talk about? So the important one things he talked about was planting evidence. So Phelps asked him, did you ever consider the possibility that the evidence had been planted? And he said, yes, we did. We looked into it. In fact, they sent a question to the judge. They were looking for a report on the CERT team because they wanted to find out. And I remember in that trial, we didn't know exactly what they were looking for. And I don't think there was a report for them to get. But it turns out what they were trying to get was they wanted information of who were the guys on the CERT team and where were they from. So they're trying to see if there could have been someone that was local that could have been perhaps involved with planting evidence. And I don't think they ever got that information, but they must have concluded no. Now, the CERT team, those guys are drawn. The CERT team is a statewide part of the state police, so they would have been drawn from all around. I don't know if any of them were from that particular area, but that's why it took so long to get them all together during the blizzard too. But so they realized there just wasn't really time to plant evidence, and these guys did a great job for not knowing the case and listening to it just over those weeks. But we can expand on that and say that, yeah, there was no time. That vehicle, when it pulled into the Sallyport, pulled in at 5:36. The door closed at 5:41. The main taillight piece was found at 5:45. The CERT team was digging in an area, if you look at the pictures, about the size of 2 parking spaces. There was 7 people on the CERT team, and they described it as they were shoveling almost shoulder to shoulder. So 7 guys squeezed into a small area shoveling. They take out a shovelful. Lieutenant O'Hara described it pretty well. They take out a shovelful, and then they kind of sift it into a pile to look for pieces. And they found the main piece 3 feet down at ground level. He described in detail how they went through the softer snow until they hit harder snow at the bottom. Then what that was we know that Lucky plowed sometime around 5:30. So he left the plow bank, and then it snowed about 2 feet on top of that. That accounts for the 3 feet. And you're going down, and as you know, plowed snow is harder. And it was inside that, at the ground level, at the street level, that they found the main piece. Now, there is no way that piece could have been planted there after the car arrived back at the Sallyport, taken from there, and then somehow rushed to the crime scene and buried there in front of all the other guys. There's no way. It's actually, I don't even, you get frustrated because you don't know how much I should address this. You see it all the time. Still on social media, people saying, oh, it was not, the piece was found on top of the snow. These people just don't know the evidence, and it's so frustrating. Because and part of it is they just don't want to, right? They don't want to know the evidence. So what else? And they talked about the the vehicle data, and he even called it the tech stream data. So he remembered that it was called tech stream. So this was I think it was DMT because he used specific professional language to talk about John's injuries. And so that would be someone with medical training probably, but we don't know. They disguised the voice too. And so, but he said the vehicle data showed that Karen had backed up based at high speed around the time when John's phone stopped moving. So they paid attention to that too. And so they just used Occam's razor here and said the simplest explanation is she did it. Now we've given evidence now that we hope we've tied together evidence that has been presented by the state with some images with the help of Chick from the Bricks and some other people that hopefully the state will use that or make their own something similar. But he mentioned that too, this juror, that those kind of things would have helped them to look at something visual that they can look at. And if you if they're not able to get any new vehicle data, you can still go with the correlation that I've put together that really shows within a few seconds what time this collision happened. And it really is bulletproof. There's no way you can really poke a hole in it. There's no way. So you just have to present this better to a jury. And when that happens, there's no way there's going to be an acquittal. But can you get one or two jurors again that you just can't get through because they're turtle riders or they came in with their minds made up or whatever, or they have some other bias against the police? You never can know with a jury. So you can get one or two outliers like that. You're not going to get 12. The evidence is just too powerful. So let's talk about Dr. Russell. Now here again, be ready to get mad at me a little bit, be forgiven, be gentle. It's Saturday night. I'm an old dude. I thought Dr. Russell did a pretty good job up until that moment when when Brennan asked her if she had help preparing her expert report that she put in more recently. Oh, sorry. Let me bring up the thank you, Tom. I'm back. I was not really gone, but I had the wrong image up. Thank you, T. So, for me, I thought Dr. Russell, up until that point, did a pretty good job. And what worries me is that each chance she gets to do this, it's going to get better and better. Like with anybody, practice makes perfect. She has absorbed, presumably with the help of defense, the types of criticism that are going to come against her since the trial. So, for instance, they know that people want to know what her methodology was to make this. It wasn't just her eyeballing this and saying, that's dog bites. The more she can explain in detail the methodology that she used, the better. And she came in with that. So, for instance, a big thing that she focused on was how the threads of the punctures and rips inside John's shirt were outside the holes. So to her, this was an indication of an object that punctured through and then pulled out. So for her, like a tooth. Now, I'm not an expert on this. I couldn't, that sounds reasonable to me, but what do I know, right? I have no idea about that. I would expect that an expert from the prosecution will give a different explanation for how those threads are like that. But in any case, she does have a method now, a lot more reasons in her analysis than she had before. She has changed things a little bit. She didn't seem to think that there were any wounds from claws. She didn't rule it out, but she thought the wounds were from teeth. Sorry, just checking messages. And also we got in anticipation of where the state is probably going from the defense. The defense must know this. So they spent, I think, about a half hour discussing dental impressions. And so that's an indication that the state is probably going to bring in dental impressions of Chloe, or if not from Chloe, maybe just from a German Shepherd, right? And with Dr. Russell, she had an explanation for that. She said, well, with a civilian dog attack, civilian means a dog that's not police trained, the wounds tend to be non-specific enough where you would be able to make identification based on dental impressions. So, but that's an indication. So they're preparing. So she's been preparing for months how to improve her presentation. And now, because the state asked for this Dauber hearing, she got a chance to practice it on the stand. To me, that's a risky thing for the state to do, because now she's improved significantly from May until now, or June, whenever June until now. And now she's going to improve yet again between now when she testifies, presumably in May or maybe April. That's a risky thing to do. She's been coached, absolutely, but she's going to get better at it, right? That's what she's been coached, and she admitted on the stand that she had help preparing that report. But the fact that she's been coached, the jury's, if she does a good job presenting it on the stand, the jury's not going to know that. I want to put up something else. We found something. Somebody sent me this. This was an article on Dr. Russell. It's actually a pretty cool article, but there's a clue in this also to Dr. Russell's motives here. So this was from the LA Times, June 26th in 2000. So 24 years ago. And it's a pretty cool article. It's striking how much Dr. Marie Russell still thinks like a cop. Inside the emergency room at County USC Medical Center on a recent afternoon, she worries almost as much about preserving the bullet that pierced a shooting victim's flesh as she does about his physical discomfort. So she's working at an ER where there's a lot of shootings and a lot of gangsters coming in. And because of her, she had worked as a Medford cop. And so because of that, she had a kind of a law enforcement approach to this, and she started documenting the wounds. Now, none of these were dog bite wounds, at least not mentioned in this article, and documenting the tattoos that these guys used. And she ended up making a photographic record of hundreds of these. So, this was, I think it gives you, so this was it was Malden, Mass. So she was a former Malden, Mass police officer. So this is a woman that did do a lot of interesting things in her life and was once a very valued professional and does have a lot of experience. She has shot more than 750 photos of tattoos. This was back then. And hundreds more of unusual wounds to help her understand how they're inflicted and how they heal. So again, this is not about dog wounds, but she is someone that not only treated wounds, but documented hundreds of them and observed how they heal. She incorporates the photos into lectures she delivers here and abroad to medical students, law enforcement, and forensic societies. She shares medical and sociological insights into sexual assaults, domestic violence, child abuse. All right. This guy, Noguchi, whoever he is, said she is single-handedly developing a new field of what you call clinical forensic medicine. We only have one Marie Russell, but we need at least 1,000 such persons to serve major communities. So, I mean, she's done some impressive things in her life. But this feeds into, I think, why she got involved in this case. All right. So she's a native of Woodside, New York. She was one of 5 children raised by a father who worked for the railroad. She remembers as far back as the 2nd grade admiring her family doctor. A good student, Russell spent a year at MIT, but moved home when her mom developed cancer. After she returned to Massachusetts and began taking courses in criminalistics and criminal investigation at Northeastern. So at that point, she was leaning towards law enforcement, I guess, and not medical school. And she took the police exam, became the first woman police officer on the force. So she says in 1983, which she recalls as the hardest year of my life. She was 28 years old and juggling first-year medical studies with a full-time police job 50 miles away. So, that's an impressive thing. She's a young, at the time, very intelligent and very energetic woman. In her second year of medical school, she was introduced to pathology and found herself torn between doing advanced training in that or in emergency medicine. So she ended up doing both, obviously. And so she eventually heads out to USC in 1987 to do her residency. She became interested in gunshot and stab wounds, looking at the symbols on the tattoos. Scrolling through. All right, so this is interesting. All right, so despite her demanding schedule in the emergency room, where she's as apt to help a patient untangle an intravenous line as she is to mobilize a trauma team, and teaching. All right, so just let me just read this over again, because I wanted this maybe captures what's going on here and why she has inserted herself into this case. So this is 24 years ago. Despite her demanding schedule in the ER, where she's as apt to help a patient untangle an intravenous line as she is to mobilize a trauma team. So she's working in ER at one of the busiest ERs in the country. She's in demand. She is running from fire to fire inside that ER. And at the same time, she's teaching at USC and at Cal State, but also she is now managing to raise a nephew who is 14 and a niece who is 18 and now married. So this tells us that she herself was not married and does not have children. And again, that feeds into, I think, what happened here. So she says, bringing up children is the hardest thing I've done. All right, and this is where it ends. Even at home, she spends many hours scanning her forensic photos into a computer. In her prized time off, she manages to put the darkness aside to swim or camp, although she does admit her preferred recreational reading is true crime. So here you have a woman who was very, 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 very much in demand, especially as she reached the peak of her career, but really all of her life, was extremely energetic and successful and in demand for all kinds of things. What happens to someone like that when they retire and they don't have kids? What do they do? How do they satisfy that need with that energy that they still would have? And how do they satisfy that need to be needed? That need to be in the juice, so to speak, or your there's big things happening and you're vital to them. It must be a terrible thing to be like that and then suddenly have that taken away from your life. And I think we've seen that maybe a little bit too with Sean on the Gulf. This stuff draws these guys to maybe really want to get involved because now they're retired. They were doing exciting things before, and now they're not. So it pulls them in, but maybe it causes them to not have the best judgment because if they're not recognizing how deep their own need is. Again, I'm obviously speculating here. To me, Dr. Russell sounded on the stand as a woman who is still intelligent and capable, but she's a little bit older. All right. And so her presentation isn't going to be super smooth like the ARCA guys. Those guys are around 40. But here's an accomplished woman who wants to be important again And I'm not sure she recognizes that maybe is driving her here, but her passion outside of medicine was true, and law enforcement was true crime. And here she is suddenly finding herself in perhaps the biggest true crime case nationally going on at the time. Oh, it's certainly one, top 5. And she's looking at this and she's saying, here's something I can make a contribution to. And I think that's what's driving this here. Now, I want to correct something. I want to change something. So one thing that I said the other day after the hearing was that in a situation like this, let's say you have competing experts. So the prosecution is going to bring in their dog bite expert, which I guess is somebody that wrote a book. No doubt a really good expert, probably somebody better than Dr. Russell. But let's call Dr. Russell a pretty good expert in some ways herself. So you put these guys up there. And what I said at the time was, let's say that the state's expert is a little bit better than Dr. Russell. But the tie, I said, goes to the defense. And so that's a win for them. But I want to reconsider that. Because I don't think it's going to work that way. If the state's evidence depended on something, on their interpretation of what the wounds were, if that was a vital part of their case, then yes, the tie would go to the defense. But it's different here. The state's case that Karen's Lexus struck John is not built on the wounds. It's built on the vehicle data. It's built on the physical evidence there. It's built on her statements and her strange behavior. It is not built at all on John's wounds. In fact, the state in the first trial didn't even really try to explain the wounds very much. So that changes things. I think what's going to happen here is if you have 2 experts that are split on this, what's going to happen is the jurors are going to put this away. They're going to say, all right, I don't want to hear any more about dog bites. It's a wash. Let's go on to other evidence. That is a win for the prosecution. That's a big win for them. That's what's going to happen here. The prosecution's goal here is to get the jury to just ignore anything about dog bites. If they get that, that's what they want. Then they move on to their evidence. And I think that's what's going to happen here. As long as they bring in a decent expert, and this one is supposed to be very good, then you're going to end up with a wash. The jury's going to sit there and say, well, I don't know, one expert says this and the other expert says that. What are we to make of it? And they're going to say, all right, forget it. Let's just move. When you got 12, a jury deliberation is a very different kind of thinking. It's not each one of us, when we're looking over stuff, we're going over it in our own mind, and we're going through our own logic trees, and we're our own pattern of evaluating things. But when you have 12 people in a room, it automatically, and they're all equal, even though there might be a jury foreman and there might be some people that are the loudest voice in the room or something like that. But the reality is they're still all equal votes. And so while there might be a little bit of leadership in there, you're not going to, it's just there's a way of, when you have 12 equal people trying to make a decision, what they're going to do is move aside things that aren't in agreement. So when you get people divided so let's say people are divided about what those wounds are in their deliberation process. Eventually, the only way to move on and continue deliberating is to just put that stuff aside and say, all right, we can't agree on that part. Let's just let it go. So you're going to see that with most of the evidence in a case, or much of it. There's going to be a lot of things that they just can't really make up their minds on, so they just dismiss it. I think that was the case with the voicemails, to be honest. I don't think that they looked at those. The state thought that those voicemails were going to be super meaningful, and they weren't. And they just dismissed it. We don't hear any of the jurors talk about it. And I didn't think they would. And so they just dismissed that stuff. They move on to the things that they can all pretty much agree on. So it's pretty hard to it's pretty hard to say that Karen didn't go backwards 24 miles an hour. That's the data. So unless you're going to really, it's pretty hard to get jurors to buy into the idea that the state police faked that and they made that data, you're getting into weird levels of conspiracy that involve so many people that normal jurors are just going to dismiss that. They just are. So, well, I'm curious to see where this will go on January 8th when the state gets to finish. It's unfortunate the way it went down there, because when Brennan first started trying to take her apart on challenging her expertise, she withstood that very well. And it actually worried me a little bit, because he came off looking a little bit like Alan Jackson-esque, like he was trying to stunt for the audience or for the, whatever. It's, like saying that she's anointed herself. It was because she said, in my opinion, I'm an expert. So but she is qualified. I thought that came across as not very effective, and I don't think it would work very well with a jury. However, then when he asked her, did you get help preparing this? Then things really, Thomas says it's January 7th. So I guess it's January 7th, guys. Thank you. So she admitted that she had help, and he said, who helped you? And she said, the lawyer, Alessi, who was the one that did the questioning of her in the morning. Now, that makes, as soon as that questioning came up, my ears perked right up. How much did he coach her? How much did he influence? So it was the combination of the fact that he helped her prepare, with the fact that her conclusions have changed significantly, which she admitted from what she testified in the trial. So you have changing conclusions, not radically changing, but changing conclusions, combined with the fact that she was helped by the defense jury. And that seemed to really unglue her. She became really rattled. She's scratching and fidgeting. And I mean, that was about as rattled as I've seen a witness on the stand outside of a movie, right? She was really, really rattled. And fortunately for her, it came to, they ran out of time. So now wherever Brennan was going, he had set it up by getting her rattled, but he didn't get to the finish line because they ran out of time. So that's unfortunate. But I still have to question what the purpose of this hearing was. You did manage to maybe find some buttons that they can push in the trial, but that's the good part for the prosecution. But she's not going to be dismissed. She's not going to be disqualified. The judge is going to allow her. And so then what that leaves is on the plus side for the prosecution, maybe they found some things that they can, some wedge areas that they can use and exploit in the trial. But on the minus side, she gets to really practice how she's going to handle that now when there's no jury. So thank you, Marlene. I appreciate it. Actually, I really should thank everybody else too. I do appreciate it, guys. So let me go back to the thank yous. So Marlene, for the super sticker, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And Lisa Cox, thank you very much, Lisa. Rena Pachil says her face is still swollen. You must have crashed. I didn't see what happened. Did you? No riding or bike. Did you crash on your bike? Rena, that sucks. Send me a private message. Let me know what's going on. Hope you're okay. And Claire Marie Stewart, who also contributes by email messages. But anyways, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Heisenberg, as always, thank you, man. He says, I would love for her supporters to explain scientifically how a dog can come in contact with human flesh and leave no DNA behind. So Dr. Russell kind of addressed that a little bit too. And basically what she's saying is, hey, I can't speak for the quality of the testing. And that's listen, Heisenberg's point is very well taken, and I agree with it. But it's not something that that the expert, Dr. Russell, has to consider. She is not a DNA expert. She doesn't know what techniques were used. So it really doesn't have to be a factor for her analysis. The dude abides. Thank you, my man. Says real eyes, real eyes, real eyes. 2-pack. Heisenberg's back for more. Heisenberg says her supporters don't seem to grasp that every dog bite comes saliva. Nothing found. So yeah, I mean, so a dog bite comes with saliva, that would leave DNA. And then Heisenberg says, I can't wait to see the final chapter. TB Turtle Boy versus Karen Reed. It's definitely got to, we've all known it's got to end up there eventually. Eventually, Turtle Boy will end up at war with everyone, with the exception of the pit bull. She'll be there stirring the Kool-Aid at the end. But I think eventually it goes bad for everybody. And I hope that's something that Meredith keeps in mind. You got to know how it's going to end, Meredith. And when it goes that way, he's going to try to destroy you too. Artwork says we should plan a member get together in the spring. Yeah, absolutely. If not sooner, right? I've actually talked about this with some other people too. And the only issue is we just worry about security. So if we do a get together and the other side knows about it, it ends up, if you're doing it somebody's establishment, do they have to worry about a mob showing up and causing trouble? As a former bar owner, I'm concerned about those kind of things. I wouldn't want to do that to someone else. So I don't know if there's it's unfortunate that that's what we're dealing with here. If it's just a matter of creepy Tom CPU outside taking video, that's fine. But even that's a little intrusive. You just want to, most of the people here that contribute want to remain anonymous. They don't want to be on a Turtle Boy video and attacked by that mob that makes shit up about people, or looking what that very objectionable man Jimmy from Worcester, the Judge Canoni clown, Auntie Deb. What's he gonna? What are they gonna do? Take pictures and video of everybody entering and leaving the event, and then try to suggest that they've done something else in their past, robbed the bank, whatever. I mean, they don't know any limitations. The only thing they know is to try to destroy. Back to that shadow thing. They've managed to turn everybody else that they perceive as part of the conspiracy or defending the conspiracy as some kind of evil being that has to be destroyed through any means possible. That's how they work. And then finish on Marlene. Thank you again, Marlene. Love you guys. Appreciate it. All right, so let's get to some questions. 9:50. Wow, that took me longer than I expected. Hi, Jules. How are you? We do have to do it in secret, she says, and not let anyone know where it is. Yeah, I don't know how to protect that event. I really don't. I mean, unless you make it a relatively small group, and so you really have made sure you've vetted everybody. It's just so easy for that. It becomes a headache, right? As long as one person finds out. Comfort and Joy says we could all wear disguises. What's going on with Sean? I don't know. I haven't talked to him. I don't know what he's up to. I think everybody that, I'm not saying he's not a former Free Karen Reed. He might still be Free Karen Reed, but I think everybody that is going through this process of realizing that they've been duped, it's a process and it takes time to get through it. And people that have a level of decency in them will go through the process. The prosecution needs Dr. Kenny Kinsley. Is that the guy? I thought the guy they were getting, his name is Crosby. I'm not sure. I forget. I had the bio up last week. Come to New Mexico and I will host you. You fly me up there and I'll come. That would be awesome. free speech, and we can't even meet up in the world. That's what Phelps really did a good job of highlighting that on his last episode, that this guy pretends to be for free speech, but when all he's about is silencing free speech. And there's no question. I've been saying that myself for a long time. Layla, I don't know about the chip off. I mean, I have some kind of information that it seems to have gone off Friday, but I really don't actually know that, and no idea at all whether they got any information, any new data, but you could speculate that the fact that the judge waited till Monday and then she agreed with the motion to postpone. So it's possible that that is a sign that she found out they did get new data, but that's totally speculation on my part. Oh, yes. Anthony, good to see you, man. Anthony did a great job on our members only chat. So we'll have to have another one of those soon. He did a fantastic job. He says Brendan Kane does a great job speaking about John and the details of the case. Brendan really hit it out of the park. Brendan did a fantastic job on Phelps episode number 10. He may have been on other episodes too. I didn't hear all of them, but he did a great job on that one. TB loves what he controls. Yeah, TB and Height Turtle Boy too. TB, yeah, that's what they do. Is he has learned. So somebody said to me today, like Turtle Boy has mentioned in an article or a post this week, where many times he's taken down a blog that was destructive of someone because they asked him to and he felt bad. But what that has caused him to learn over time is that if you blog about somebody and it really embarrasses them, and then they beg you to take it down, and you take it down, now you own them. Like Jessica Machado, the Fall River chick there. He owns her. And so, I mean, he's learned that that's probably how he learned that this threat of smear from his blog is how you control people. I don't think, I mean, in hindsight, it looks like it was easy to understand, but I don't think he started out thinking that way. It's just something he learned. Chrissy talking about, we'll pull that one up. It's a long one. Now, knowing all the info Turtle put out came from Karen Reed makes one think, and learning Scanlon didn't tell her attorneys what they've been claiming. I actually studied this a lot, and there's no way of knowing, but I think Scanlon picked up scuttlebutt that was just urban legend shit that developed naturally, organically on the ground in the 2 or 3 days after John's death. And that when he picked this up, thinking maybe it was real, he went to Karen. And I do believe that he did tell those theories. I know for a fact that he told some of those theories to Yannetti. Now, he didn't tell them that he had inside information. He told them they were theories. But this gave them a focus to put their private investigator, Paul Mikowski, to start looking for things that they could stitch into the narrative that he was killed in the house. This gave them a focus. And they started doing that. They went and talked to Lucky and a lot of other things like that. So I do believe it started with Scanlon, not because he had any information, but he had theories, and Yannetti and Karen exploited them. Barb417 said, Kevin, I love the members only show. I just think the members would have liked to turn chatting live with you. Just a thought. Yeah, I want to do that. I mean, so we were trying to do that, and I left it open so that anybody that wanted to come in, all they had to do was email me. When you say chat, do you mean voice chat or just chatting in the chat thing? So unfortunately, I made a mistake. I got to figure out, I did the members only. That was, but it was only members only. All that really meant was that only members could comment. And that's not what I meant. I wanted it to be a members only, that literally only members could see it. So I got to figure out, I'm going to try to do it that way next time. And so But the problem is I gotta figure out a way to do this. But the thing is I wanted to make it so that people that don't want to buy the membership, but we recognize them as regulars here, they can still come in and watch. And so what I was doing them was giving them the stream link so they could come in, sit in basically backstage. And we had some people backstage doing that. So I got to just figure out a way to do it. But I don't. Were you interested, Barb, in speaking like through voice, or were you interested in just chat? Chat showing their faces. Well, that'd be great too. The problem is that, and so we could. I've never done. We have a Discord group, and I've never done like a video on it or anything like that. We could do that, but there, I can't promise that somebody can't sneak in. That's a turtle person, and is going to take clips and then put that out there to try to destroy people. So again, these free speech people make it so that it's very hard for us to do free speech or to meet on our own. That's why I say it's a mob. It is a mindless mob. So so Emily Suzanne talks about them. I guess I'm learning that the membership thing, you can't get it from your phone. So you have to go on your laptop, and next to the subscribe button, there's a join button. And it's like $2.99 a month. And I don't want anybody to do it unless they just want to support the channel. I don't want anybody to feel obligated. It's not necessary at all. So we'll always find a way to get you in. We will always find a way to. You are anybody that's here contributing in chat is a valued member, and we don't want you to miss out. So we will find a way always to get you in. And so there'll always be a way where you can email me before or even during the show, and I'll get you in. So what do you guys think of? We got mostly women here. I don't know, but what do you guys think of Bill Belichick going to North Carolina? I actually am a fan of it. I think it's one of the most respectable things he's done. He's 71, right? Why should he give up coaching? It's the one thing he enjoys doing. But go down and just do something for the love of coaching. He can bring in the people around him that he wants, and he's no longer worried about Don Shula's record for most wins as a coach. And I think it's great. Focus on take a small football program and try to turn it into a winner. I think it's awesome. Purchase I don't know. I don't even know if there is all kinds of music. I want to purchase the annual membership. Is there an annual membership up front? I don't even know that. When these things for the memberships, I had to set them up automatically when the channel got monetized. I figured it was either that when I first set it up. I think it was when it got monetized. And you get monetized after you get X amount of viewing hours and subscribers. But I never really put any thought into it when I set it up. Marlene, yeah, you have a good point. You said, I finally figured out, but I don't see a star next to my name. Yeah, not only that, your name is not highlighted. I'm not sure, but I think the people that are members, Marlene, their name shows up green, like Maui Swift here. You can see her name. That's green. Cara B, Cassie Marie. I think that means those guys are members. I'm not sure. You guys know I'm a boomer. I don't know how these things work. So is there anything else you guys want to talk about as far as the case? So I've been on for a couple hours, and for the people in the Discord, I apologize. I've been a little less active lately. I've had kind of a headache the last few days. Z in the house says, as a woman, she prefers to watch the Celtics and the rise of Peyton Pritchard. How did they do tonight, by the way? They had a game tonight, too. Pritchard's been doing great this year. And hopefully, he was useless in the playoffs last year. He's always been useless in the playoffs. Hopefully, this is the year that finally buds into his potential. And I think he will. Oh, it's the Wizards tomorrow night. Oh, okay, good. That means I get to watch it. Good, excellent. I don't know why I thought it was tonight. You guys got any questions? You want me to try to come up with a joke? And hey, hi Hillbilly, good to see you, man. Hillbilly says green is members, and a color of star represents length of membership. Oh wow, I did not know. Pritchard is number 2 in the league for 3-pointers. I mean, he's on a path to get the 6th man of the year award right now. Pat says he would have preferred to see Bill go to an NFL team. Yeah, you know what though? The problem is, Pat, I actually think he was going to fail. I think maybe he knew that. His coaching is not, I don't want to take anything away from a guy that won all those championships, but to me, that defense, Artworks, you made it. Good job. Thank you, Artworks. That defense had been more or less failing since about 2009, although they did a fantastic job in the Super Bowl against the Rams, but as a general rule, not too good. And there was his drafting had been terrible for about 12 years. I just didn't really think that he was going to turn it around. And I don't know if I don't think he'd be capable of turning it around anywhere else either. So if you go out and win 4 or 5 games a season, it would take him another 8 years, I think, to catch on Shula. So he just knows he doesn't have it anymore. Yes. So Turtle Boy 2 says, my client had no criminal intent. So that was on Wednesday. John was killed on a Saturday. Dave as well. I have a couple of friends, Dave. They're both, well, one of them is going through a hard time now. Dave, Kenny in Worcester. So I don't think he's probably listening, but if you are Dave, Kenny, Whitey, best of luck, man. Stay strong. He's going through some tough treatments. As far as the Dave you're thinking of that I am still great friends with, I talk to him several times a day. He's doing great. He's in a career that's best to keep low when it comes to this kind of stuff. Lay low. Focus on your career. Artwork says, thank you, Kevin and Tom, for your balanced and straight shooter approach. Tom, what are we looking into for Marlene? I missed that. Sorry, shit. Let me see if I can scroll back. Charge $2.99 for membership. I believe that's what it is. $2.99 for membership. That's correct. I think that's what I set it up at the beginning. And again, I appreciate it. It's not, I don't expect it. There were expenses with the channel, and I just wanted to set it up to hope. When I first set this up, the idea was hopefully someday those memberships would equal the expenses of the channel. And that is the case now. So it's not something that anybody should have to worry about. Don't worry, we'll be fine. We're not going anywhere. So her membership didn't, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it takes a day. Let's try it. Let's see what happens next show. But you have my email, and you're not going to miss anything. Let's put the email in to make sure. We are never going to do a private show that we won't get you into. And all of our regulars here will always be able to get into the private shows, whether they figure out, because I mean, some people don't even have accounts. So It's not, we'll always find a way to get you in. Just all you have to do is email me and I'll get you backstage. Backstage is, where we do all the cool parties too. So good night, Turtle Boy 2. So if anybody wants to get into the Discord, just email me. The Discord goes, there's a bunch of people in it, but the activity level goes up and down. And I know I'm probably to blame for that because I don't want to make this, I'm just going to be honest about this. And it might sound a little funny, but activity related to this case in so many ways and things that I can't go into has really picked up in the last 5 or 6 weeks. And I really end up, I've had unfortunately the book is like 99% done, but I end up on the phone all day. The phone kind of never stops ringing. And they're important, relevant calls. But it's just left me kind of frustrated where, not frustrated, but where I just, sometimes I sit down and think if I get some moment to do something, I don't go into the Discord. So I go through periods of being active with it. And then sometimes I go a couple of days and not in it. So, and then I think probably people there maybe get a little frustrated that I'm not there, that whatever, it's unrun or something like that. But it's like having a bar without a bartender. So I'll have to find a bartender to man the Discord bar when I'm not around to keep it entertaining. Not that I'm keeping it entertaining anyways, but that's what goes on. There's just been, there are things that I wish I could talk about them openly and stuff, but just crazy, crazy stuff that's gone on in the last 5 or 6 weeks and it seems like something comes out of the blue every couple of days. Interesting things, but most of them are things that I can't at this time talk about, but with some luck, some of these things I'll be able to put in the book, but I don't want to ever betray confidentiality or do anything that's going to get people in trouble or anything like that. So they're all factors that feed into it. So Maui says, boo. All right, yeah, you're right. I know, I get it. All right, so it's been over 2 hours. No one has any more questions. So I have to go so Tom can go have his ice cream. If Tom doesn't get his ice cream by 10:30, it's our fault. You guys know that, right? All right, guys. Thank you again, as always, for being here. And I don't have any ice cream on hand, so I won't be having any tonight. But I got some crackers. I think I have some graham crackers somewhere. Thank you, Jane. Good night. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Stay strong. Stay fighting. Stand tall. Stay rational.